So let's draw us some finch beaks. And what I'm going to do is we're going to go for the split screen again. And hold on a moment. I am setting up my screen. And so the Galapagos Islands are a little archipelago off of Ecuador. So they're about at the equator. And this is one of the locations that Chuck Darwin stopped on his big voyage. And here I go. And he collected a bunch of bird specimens there and later brought them back. He had stumbled on an amazing sort of laboratory for studying change and thinking about the sort of evolution, but he actually was not aware that these finches were this gold mine when he was there. The finches aren't even mentioned in his, when he first published The Origin of Species. So I'm now going to bounce over to, let's see. Oh, first I'm going to do a little screen share of, nope, not that, not that, not that. Aha. So this is by looking at, whoa, that's a terrible slide. Always check your slides before you put them on. But this is a sort of analysis of the DNA of these birds. And what we find is that they kind of lump into a few little groups. There is a group called ground finches, and there are tree finches, and then there's a few other odd finches that are in their own genus. But so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these little birds. And they've got different shaped beaks. From looking at the genes on these, you can figure out how different one bird is from another in its genetic code. And you can also, by looking at the DNA that is in its mitochondria, so you've actually got inside your cells, there's different DNA inside your mitochondria, and you can use that as a clock to figure out if, because as mutations happen over time, it kind of gives you you can use it to sort of to date stamp how long ago changes happened. So what's crazy about that is it kind of allows you to have this clock built into the DNA of every organism in the planet. And so not only can you look at how closely related things are, but you can also get a sense of how long those branches have been diverged from each other. And so they think that this is a kind of a fairly recent phenomenon. A little finch flew over to these volcanic islands that popped out of the ocean, and a small group of them colonized this. And from there, ended up on, flew over to the next island, to the next island, to the next island. So they were separated from each other. There are different environmental conditions in these places. And the birds are really, really responsive to, they're very responsive um, to changes in food. Specifically, their beak shapes change. People were studying these on this island, and they found that during a drought, all the little seeds got eaten up. And only the birds with some of these birds with heavier beaks, they did much better at surviving than birds with little beaks. And they went in there and they used nets, caught every bird on an island, and tracked its babies and its babies and babies over this year. So they in the study, they knew exactly who was related to who. And they're able to figure out, like at the start, before the drought, they just got crazy lucky. They happened to be there right when this drought happened, before the drought, during the drought, and after the drought. So before the drought, there are all these different beak shapes. During the drought, if you were one of these, this is a study done with these medium ground finches, the ones that had smaller bills, when the small food got scarce, they all starved to death, and they're just picking up dead birds everywhere. And then after this whole event, those ones with larger bills that could crack open some of these harder, tough seeds, those ones gave birth to, surprise, surprise, babies with big beaks. And so they're able to actually watch this sort of change in the beak size and see its relationship to changes in environmental conditions. And then they watched it through a drought condition. And it turns out if you're in a drought, it's harder, through a really wet season. And that caused these vines to grow everywhere on the islands that drop these little tiny seeds, making it also harder to find the big seeds. And in these conditions, you didn't want to have a big beak. So it's this crazy laboratory for looking at change, and extremely cool. At the end of this program, I'll put a link in the chat for a short 15-minute video that is done by the American Museum of Natural History, that is kind of, you're on the island with the people who are doing this research, and you can kind of see what was going on. It's very, very well done, and is worth 15 minutes of your time. Very, very well spent. Also, the book, The Beak of the Finch, is all about this research and study. So it was just this incredible opportunity in laboratory. So how do these little birdies look? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's take a look at those, at some of them right now. I've gone to birdpixel.com, and I am going to share. There we go. So over here on the left, they're not the most elegant, fancy bird. The males are black. Sometimes males will have sort of mostly black on them, but with a little bit of brown on their belly. The females are brown, and but as you kind of look around, you're going to see that there are different ones with different bill shapes. So these are all these different species. And I'm going to start with one here with a really big beak. And this is appropriately named. This is the large ground finch. There's the large ground finch. There's the medium ground finch. There's the small ground finch. So they don't get points for creativity in naming these things. But it does help us sort them. We're here with this large ground finch. This is going to help us sort of draw the basic structure of this bill. Notice how broad across the front of the face. If you're looking at a grosbeak, you'll see the same sorts of proportions. So when I'm drawing a bird head, I usually start by drawing a ball for its head, and then I envision a line coming out under its eye. Actually, this bird is looking down a little bit. So you notice that that line from the beak, this line right here, this line coming up the beak, goes right to the eye. So that's my eye beak line. And this bird has just a crazy big beak. And what I'm going to be focusing on today is how to get this bird's beak to sort of get the variation in beaks, get them to fit into the head of the bird so that we're not just sort of drawing a bird like, here's its beak. You know, it kind of looks like somebody took a carrot and stuck it in the side of a snowman. We're also going to be rotating the bird's head around and drawing these beaks from different angles. Let's take a look at the shapes of these different parts of the beak. And so once I've got this thing lightly blocked in like this, the back of the head, neck coming down, I'm going to switch over to a different pencil here, and I'm going to start to draw on top of that. Well, what do we have? We have the line coming down the mouth. Now, notice that the line of the mouth is really easy to see right here. And out here, if you squint your eyes, it's harder to see. Very easy to see, harder to see. You will see this in a lot of birds. If you draw the little line down the mouth as a straight line like that, your birds often start to look really cartoony. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a little line coming out here, and then I'm going to just sort of let that fade out. So I can punch it in and then fade it out. That beak edge, the lower beak, actually turns down here. So the line doesn't come straight back here. You can see it actually turning down like that. And then there's a sort of a feather edge down here. We're going to come up. Oh, look at this. This beak is so big that my brain didn't let me draw it deep enough when I was sketching this out. Look at the distance from here down on this beak. It's like that. Wow, that's crazy deep bill. The deeper your bill, the better you're going to be at busting open big seeds. Now, let's put the top in on top of that. We're going to have a little bit of a curve coming down here. And the bird's nostril is up in this area. See, there's a little bit of the sheath of the bill comes out here onto the bird's forehead. There's room here for the nostril, and the edge of the beak wraps around that nostril. So there is here on this end, coming down here, there's a little bit of a bump here, and then it has a flat edge. Final thing to notice is this is actually a subtle thing, but it ends up being a really important detail. Notice that there are feathers that stick out underneath the beak here. So the bird's head doesn't attach back here. The bird's skin actually comes up in a little groove right here underneath. And so you get a little bit of bird's chin sticking out here. So the next thing I'm going to do, even though this is focusing on beaks, I am going to put in the eye because then the bird starts to look a lot more alive. I'm going to look at the distance between here and where I see that eye. That distance, that zone in there is called lores. That's Lores. And that's a very useful distance to look at to get your beak placed right. Your eye here. I'm going to put a little line of feathers right around that. And then there's just a little bit of kind of rough feathers in here. Sometimes if you kind of put these feathers in the lores, this area in here, this visually attaches your, it attaches the eye to the beak, kind of connects these things in here. And so it doesn't look like you have an eye floating in the middle of the head. So notice that the eye here is too far back. It's just feels like it's floating in the head. Two common mistakes with drawing bird eyes. You don't want it just to be this island of eye in the middle of the head sea. So a little bit of feathers around there, a little bit of the lores connects that in with that structure. This is the large beaked ground finch. What we're going to do is compare this with a bird of the same of a different species. Let's take a look at a small-billed ground finch, and you look like you've got a small bill. I'll bet you are a small-billed ground finch. Yeah, I bet you are. Bless your little heart. Let's pop that one in. Yes, small ground finch. Here it is. All right. We're going to draw this one and notice the similarities and the differences. Well, this one's looking in the wrong direction. I'm going to start again with a ball. I'm going to draw a little line coming out here, my eye beak line. I am going to roughly this a little triangle here in the front. And look at the proportions of this triangle. Look at how much bigger this was. Here in this one, roughly the same size. I'm going to switch pencils. And I'm going to start the edge of this bill coming down. The line of the mouth, I am seeing it really dark and crisp all the way along, but I'm going to not really pop that all the way to the edge. This one also turns down, not as severely. There's a little bit of a bump here, a big bump here, a little bit of a bump. So notice that similarity. Yeah. A slight overlap here at the top. Put that in, it's going to make it look a little bit better. There's a little nostril. Nostril. And my forehead's going to come up like this. Here I'm going to put in just a few little feathers suggesting a bit of fluffiness. See how I just made those lines? So those ones put together right in here instead of, you know, that's going to look a little bit better than just a straight line coming out. And the throat, notice again that the throat, there's that zone, there's a little divot on the underside of the bill. The throat feathers are coming off here. Now I'm going to look at the distance here, critical distance. I. And if I put feathers around it, and include my lures, it attaches that beak to that head. We're going to look at one more variation in this. Oh, oh no, your friend over there. Let's check out your buddy. He's just nibbling something. Now this is the sharp-beaked ground finch, and the sharp-beaked ground finch is a this one is gotten quite a reputation. So it's looking pretty scruffy. The sharp-beaked ground finch, you know, they'll eat seeds and bugs and other things like a bird, but on 2 islands, these ones they will climb up on Nazca boobies and peck at wounds and keep them raw and open and drink their blood. So these birds have become vampires on 2 of the islands. That is pretty crazy stuff. And so they'll just sit there and they will, just take a bad wound and make it worse and worse and worse and worse. Let's put one of these beaks on it, and this is going to just help us notice differences in proportions of beaks. This one really long beak coming out here, really wide on the bottom there. So what do we have? We're going to come up, we'll corner the mouth, and out there. There's a long curve down here. Well, sharp beak. Look at the thickness of the lower part. So I want to just not have a generic beak in my head. I'm looking at what is the thickness of the top part compared with the bottom part. I'm going to have zone of feathers that gets in here. The same thing here on this super scruffy face. I don't know what this one has been sticking its face down into, all these matted feathers. Hard to see, but there actually are feathers sticking out there behind under the chin. Let's put those in. And we're going to see the same thing. There's our nostril in the top. I'm going to look at the distance here and put in. So the size of the length of these bills, the degree of the size of the top versus the bottom, these are all things that you want to look at when you're drawing a beak, and not just sort of assume that it's going to be one generic shape. Vampire finch. That's just cool. Unless you're a booby. In which case you don't think that the whole business is really that great. Load a few more birds. Let's see, where is my warbler finch? And we've got to have, I didn't check earlier to make sure there was. I just assumed there would be, but so I'm going to just draw one more variation in this bill business. Now that is, there's another one that basically looks like a warbler. And a little bill like this is great for getting small seeds and little insects. But a terrible thing if you want to crack a seed. So lengths, proportions, shapes of bills, these are all things that are going to change. But we just want to be able to look, when we're looking at the bird, we're thinking how far out does it come? What are the proportions top to bottom? We're going to look for that evidence of the nostril in the top. And you sort of notice that all of these had the bottom is after that little downturn of the mouth is a bump. In the mouth, downturn of the mouth is a bump that comes in. And that is a way to this is something that it doesn't just apply for Galapagos finches. This is useful on any bird that you want to draw anywhere. Now, let's take a look at medium ground finch that is looking towards us. We'll start with this one here. Whoa, look at that. That's really cool. If you just practice birds in side view, you're really going to limit yourself. So I really encourage people to play with some 3/4 views of birds. And that will just free you up to draw the birds in whatever position they happen to be. Here, the center line through the middle of its face is making a little moon arc across this. So if I imagine a line coming, watch for the little hand icon here, coming down the middle of its head, down through the middle of its face to the bottom of the bill here. A line bisecting the head would come down something like that. Now, this bird is looking down slightly. And now I want to think of the shape of the attachment zone for this beak. So it's going to start up in here, and it's coming down in here, and it would be doing the same on the other side. And then down below, it is probably a bit wider. Down below, our bird has so this is sort of essentially where the top part of the bill is, the bottom part of the bill. You can think of from the front, the bottom part of the bill often is sort of a shape like this. flat on the bottom. And then it's going to come up. So you're looking at it from the very front. So this part down here, down. So you want to think of, sort of visualize where that attaches in. The top part of the bill, I'm going to draw in that the crack of its mouth. It's going to go from the top part of the bill here. And you can, this line that I drew in with purple, that's there just to help me kind of visualize three-dimensionally what's going on with this. It's going to be completely hidden. And this here on the bottom is also, so I'm not going to be able to see the far side of the bill, but it helps me to visualize what's going on. It also is going to help you to keep track of the center line of the forehead. Sometimes I'll just draw a little line in it just to remind myself what's going on. To make this visually a little bit easier to understand, I'm going to erase some of the stuff that's in the back there. Have a little bit of space here. And then my eye is going to be right up there on that. Now, here on this drawing, the bill went up and then we went into the head. So it's tempting to draw from the center line here, the side of the bird's head coming up like this. Now that's going to look all wrong because that's actually the middle line of the head. Where does this bird's head actually go? It wraps around the other side of the bird. Once I put that in, the drawing starts to take on much more depth. And here, I'm going to draw with the corner of the beak and draw the edge of these feathers past where that is. Let's do one more 3/4 view bird head. There's a nice male that is looking towards us. Let's see if we can find that over there. Yes, it was there a moment ago. Come back, pretty. Ah, there you are. Again, the website is birdpixel.com. um, mad props to Vivek Kanzodi for this collection of birds. I'm going to start with a circle. The bird's eye line is going to come across here. The bird's center of its head is going to be coming across here. So in this upper part, I want to, it helps to draw it out initially, but eventually you're not going to have to. Now this bird is turned more towards me than this one. So I see more of the far side of the head and less of the bill sticking out this way. So, but it's still going to be the same basic thing. From the top of the bill here, it's coming down in a curve. And then my beak is coming up, down, turning the mouth. And to make this bottom part here less visually confusing, I'm going to put some shading in here showing, and the line of the shading is going to point like this, so that the little marks are sort of suggesting that there's a little change in plane there, leading you out to a tip of your beak right here. A little bit of space off here. And there's a little bit. Going to give it, even though it's an old black head, you still see a little bit of the texture of these feathers around the eye. From the front, a bird's head comes down, and when it hits the level of the eyes, it flares out on CD convertible. And so we see that here. We see the far side of the head coming out and tucking in, and then flaring out. The back side of the head is going to be more like. You can see a little bit of that flare out there. Here from the corner of the beak, there's a little bit of an edge of a malar zone. And the last thing I'm going to do to kind of carve this head is I'm just going to put in a little bit of show where the shadows are, because that does a really neat thing to carve this. There is a shadow zone that comes up in here. And you see the same thing happening over here. carve that little indentation by the eye. You've studied bird plumage before, you've actually seen kind of a neat feature down here. This little shadow that you're seeing out here. There's a highlight here, darker back here. That's the edge of its ear patch. So we have the same structure, but shown three-dimensional. If I want to put one more thing in here, I can put a little bit of a shadow in here, and right there along that edge there, this part is catching some light. This surface in here that turns out towards us catches more light, but right in here it's a little bit of a shadow. There. It's a cool little ground finch. Whoa, that was fun. So this applies to any bird that you're drawing. You want to pay real attention to the proportions in the bill. In this group of birds, because they are so similar looking to each other, people pay tons of attention to those bill shapes. And those bill shapes also end up having within them all of these very interesting clues about the diet of these birds. And I hope that that was helpful in getting your bird sketch on. Let's start by, I want to find out if there is, if anybody has questions about this. Or attaching bills on beaks and these sorts of things. Any thoughts or comments? So if so, Sherry, hello there. Welcome to the group. And I'm going to, you can now unmute, and I am going to add you into the spotlight.
Okay, thank you. This is a little bit of a side. I was actually a naturalist guide in the Galapagos from 1979 to 1985. So we're talking a while ago. But when I saw you were going to do this, I don't know. Oh, let me.
Yeah. Turn off the virtual background, and
yeah,
then
I need to turn off
your stuff.
Let's see. Sorry. I don't know how much I have to get out of the glare. Okay. So this is Birds of the Galapagos Falling Apart, 1974 edition. And it has the tree of the finches from the work of like Gould and Lack, which was purely taxonomical. This was before the genetic studies were done. And it's amazing how close it is to what you were showing earlier from the genetic studies.
Well, what you're raising a really, really important point. Evolutionary theory, saying that these things are, that there's a common ancestor, and from that you have things branching off, and some will be more related and others will be more related, and others will be more related. All of those ideas and patterns were established before we had an understanding of how to mess with genes and how to read the codes in genes.
Right.
And so then when this new technology comes up, it provides an independent test where you could say, if this theory is correct, I should expect to see the patterns that as you're holding up right there, I would expect to see those patterns also mapped into the genes. If they didn't arise this way, there would be no reason to expect that. But if this theory is correct, then what this is, the genes provide an independent test. So you came up with this idea based on morphological characteristics, and now it's this incredible opportunity to do a really rigorous test of that. And it matches exactly.
Right. And then the other thing I did want to say, these, of course, are very small birds. So if you actually are watching them in person, when they're moving around, it's very difficult to see, to distinguish them. You have to look at their behavior. You would talk about the ground finches, who are mainly found in the arid part of the islands. Then there's also a group that's called collectively the tree finches.
The tree finches, yeah.
Which are up in the highlands, are the areas that receive more moisture and have more vegetation. But I just thought this is also from this book. This is a life-size head of the small ground finch. So you can see the size of my finger. So that's the life-size head. So when you're looking at these birds, it can be really difficult.
Yeah.
Really
but one thing that makes it a little bit easier is that the finches on these islands, they didn't get the memo that that birds have to be skittish.
Right. But they are busy. They're busy.
They're just fearless little things. And so normally it's like, there's a bird. Oh no, we scared it away. My favorite bird watching experience, or one of my favorite bird watching experiences on the islands, was I was looking at a mockingbird, I guess, through my.
Oh, well, they come to you, of course.
Yeah, and I was looking at through my binoculars and looking at my binoculars and looking at my binoculars and looking at my binoculars. Then it hopped up on this brown thing, and then I realized that I was looking at my boot through my binoculars. So it was sitting on my toe. So I put my binoculars down and just started sketching this thing that was going like, kind of voguing for me. So, how long were you a guide on the Galapagos?
6 years.
That's
so if you find
so
a place to be still, and that's what you were talking about, if you find a place to be still, then definitely the birds might come close to you, and as will other animals.
Oh, that is so cool. What was there's tons of stories, but can you tell us one favorite Galapagos moment that you hold in your heart?
Oh, I have one I'm thinking about, and one of the things I did do on an irregular basis was I would volunteer to do field work with the scientists who were actually there from the Charles Darwin Research Station.
Yeah.
And of course, when you do that sort of thing, you're just sitting someplace and making notations of what is happening. So I was actually up on Geospizinae Island, and we were observing some finches. And right behind them, where they were nesting, were great frigate birds nesting. So here were these huge great frigate birds with the big red balloons on and doing all their display. And I was supposed to be paying my attention to these little finches and what kind of feeding, how often they were coming into feeding, and whether it was the male or the female. And that's just one memory that I have.
Oh, that's so much fun. Yeah, to get to see all those birds, the boobies breeding, the albatross breeding, all those things happening in front of you. That's wonderful.
So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, the thing that you pointed out there is just the power of an independent test. Like if you get this, here's this new technology, and it allows you to have a much greater degree of confidence in your explanation when you get that a totally independent line of evidence corroborating the patterns that you've already seen. That's so cool. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I'm going to put into the chat a YouTube video, and after this program is over, I'm going to suggest that you check that out. It sort of documents the study that the Grants did. The Grants were biologists who did this crazy cool research on finch beaks out there on the islands. And for all of us as naturalists, sort of having the Grants and what they were able to show in their research, they're the ones who they took a little island and they caught every bird on the island and tracked all of their babies and all of their babies' babies and all of their babies' babies' babies for years and years and years through droughts and through monsoons. And the results are really informative. Yeah. Any other sort of comments, thoughts, and ideas about all things beaky? Well, let's see then what's going on in other people's journals. If you have been drawing up a storm, we would love to get a peek and see what you're up to. Let's start with Kate. And hey there, it's good to see you. You can now unmute and I will bring you into the spotlight.
Hi.
Hi there.
Good to see you. I, as usual, have been drawing quite a lot.
So in the last week, about how many sketchbook pages?
Well, since I last saw you, that was the salamander class. So we can actually count through that. So let's see, one, two.
And by the way, these when you see these pages, you'll see that this isn't like one drawing per page. Kate pages are filled with like all these drawings.
Okay, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34. All right, we're at 34.
34. So
Yeah.
1 week, 34 pages. And just hold some of these up for us, because again, these 34 pages, these are often really dense. Sometimes spending more time on one thing, but often really, really dense. And what you're also going to see, I'm going to prime this for everybody. You're going to see an example of deliberate practice. What Kate often does is figures out what corner of this is challenging and dives in right there. And so let's take a look. I'm going to remove my spotlight so you get a bigger screen, okay?
Okay, well, I also note that this is just like my studies sketchbook, where if I'm working on something and doing like repetitive practice, or I'm doing a class with you or somewhere else where I'm deliberately learning something, I put it in this sketchbook. If I'm doing a sketch that I'm going to transfer for a larger painting, I'll usually do it in another bigger sketchbook. And then that one kind of gets like erased and worked with in different ways, and that gets transferred onto nicer paper. But to start off, I worked with your salamanders from last week. I just went on to californiaherps.com and I started just going through their list of photos.
Oh,
And
those have such sinuous movement.
Yeah, well, what I was trying to do was with my Rhode Island School of Design classes, I had an assignment to work on creating marks that show form and value. So I was trying to exercise that within the salamander paintings.
Your costal grooves really show the form here.
Yeah, well, they're so helpful. Let's see, that was figure drawing. Okay, so I had an assignment where, once again, you have to use the marks. This is what I was practicing for with the salamanders. So I just grabbed some organic objects that were on my kitchen counter, and you've got turkey tail mushrooms, garlic, ginger, and the idea was to show the different textures just with different marks.
Nice.
Let's see. Oh, and here's kind of practice you might appreciate. I was taking a class on figure drawing, and what they said to do was practice drawing circles and dividing them into halves and into thirds along a vertical axis, and then doing lines and practicing dividing them into halves and thirds and kind of measuring it out and trying to train your eye and kind of correct them a little bit. And then we used the same techniques to work on measuring proportions for drawing people.
Wow.
And there's this really interesting technique of using 8 circles to form out a person. And so I'm still working through that class, but there's some really interesting stuff there, like looking at how you can use that to like find all the joints for the bones and everything, and find different features on the face. So I did quite a bit of that, looking at like human anatomy and really trying to understand that a bit more. So I figure drawing people was the hardest thing for me. So I figure if I can put time into that, it'll pay off in other areas. So this was looking at like how the spine works and where to map out where your rib cage goes. And then this was looking at like the arm bones and where they attach.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Oh, this is so inspiring.
Yeah, I was watching some period pieces, so I just pause it and I would sketch what was on screen. I did this for, oh, here's some stuff I did where I was using just that one little body form thing and practicing putting like heads and torsos onto there to just sort of get a little comfortable doing that. Another one, I was watching TV and I just sort of pause it every once in a while and just draw little frame clips to work on like poses and everything.
So folks, this is, I mean, just look at Kate's mind, just sort of zeroing in on puzzles and problems and linking things together.
Yeah. Oh, and then here's from today. And then last night, I was also working on looking at trying to identify the different joints in the hand and where they kind of connect and how to map that out nicely and sort of find a good system for that.
Oh,
but also, you'll be excited to know I finally launched a YouTube channel and put out my first video. So I will link that for you.
Actually, Avea is way ahead of you. She's already got it up there.
Oh,
Check
my goodness.
Out Kate's YouTube channel.
Yeah, so I actually went and used your process of drawing salamanders and showed how I did the process of working with another sketchbook and transferring that drawing over onto nicer paper to make like a finished piece. So.
Oh, what fun. So you've got a speed draw of this tiger salamander painting. I just subscribed to your, all right, I am subscriber number 6. So this is Kate Chandler illustrations. And the link is right there in chat. So you can find it as a YouTube channel. Oh, this is going to be big fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really fun to make. I went and got the Adobe software and I saw I had video editing stuff So I figured, okay, I'm just going to learn Photoshop, Illustrator, and Adobe Premiere and see what I can make of that. So yeah.
Kate, there is there's no moss growing on your neurons.
No, just on everything else in Washington.
Well, there's that. Yes.
Yeah.
But this is such inspiring deliberate practice. So you're how long ago a few years ago you decided, okay, I'm really going to do this?
No, this was just in November that I really decided, because I had always loved scientific illustration stuff. And for a while before I started college, I considered it as a career, and then kind of got scared away from it a little bit and wanted to try and find something a little bit more, I guess, conventional. I went through a couple different majors, mostly finished environmental policy, got so kind of disheartened after working with some people in environmental consulting. And then in November, I just went, okay, I need to take a break from what I'm doing and I don't want to sit idle. So I'm going to work on this. And if it doesn't end up being the thing that I do for work, at least I'll come out of it with some interesting skills. And the more I've been looking into it, the more I see like all these different applications for it. And I'm trying to make some connections like historical society and stuff. So I figure if I can draw people really well, I can do like archaeological and historical illustration as well as scientific, which would be really cool. So yeah, hopefully I can make that work.
That is huge. That is huge. And so in November, you decided, all right, I'm all in.
Yeah, that's when I started coming to these regularly. And
what also, between then and now, so this was sort of 1 week, you saw the 36 pages, right? But since November, how big is the pile of sketchbooks and notebooks that you have filled?
It's quite big. Unfortunately, I would send a lot of them to my ex, who we were in a long distance relationship, so I was kind of send her those to tell her what I was doing. So sketchbook is knocked down to since February. So I'm trying to fill up like one of these a month. That's kind of my rough goal. Before, I'd say from November to now, I'd guess it was like that thick.
That's some pencil miles.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's been really fun to kind of go through that process. You can really see the improvement just from putting in the time.
And that's true about anything that we do. Our brains respond to that deliberate practice. So you're doing repetition with effort. You also are looking, I use the word critical, not as meaning, but critically, analytically looking at what's working, what's not working, and carrying that forward.
Well, I don't think you can afford to be too critical with like practice artwork, because if you go into it expecting it to be good from the get-go, you're just going to disappoint yourself. So I think it's a lot more helpful to not so much criticize your own work from the start, but more like do a couple of pages and then you'll kind of naturally figure out what works and what doesn't without going through that whole process of going, oh, I don't like how it looks, I'm going to stop. I think you kind of just have to keep going and keep the pencil moving.
And what do you do when your inner critic comes up and starts barking? What do you do to get it to simmer down?
I don't know. I haven't had that so much with art lately, just because I've really worked to accept that to create good art, you're gonna have to create a lot of bad art first, and not necessarily that bad art is bad. It's just, it's going to be sloppy. It's going to be unrefined until you've polished those skills. I think the best thing that you can do is, if you're really not enjoying something, you're really feeling stuck, I think maybe trying to apply that same skill somewhere else. Like if you're trying to practice something like drawing people, and if I do that for too long, I get kind of bogged down because I'll have a bunch of stuff where it doesn't work the way I like it, and I don't have any finished pieces that feel really kind of good that I want to show people. And so I'll kind of switch gears and go, okay, I'm going to take some things that I learned from this, like how limbs attach, and I'm going to go over and work with salamanders or draw something else, or even just go completely different direction, because it all connects pretty well. So yeah.
So for folks who are watching this, what you're seeing here is an example of, this is what we call growth mindset. And you really exemplify that you're not looking where you are, you've got a long-term perspective, and you understand that from here to where you want to be, there's effort, and you're in a process and on that road, and not getting bogged down and stuck by something right back here that isn't working the way that you do. You trust in that process, and it is delivering for you. That's so cool.
And the thing I found is, like, doing something is always better than doing nothing. So sometimes
I'm gonna write that down. You just dropped some wisdom on us.
Like even just doing like arm exercises where you practice like doing the circles and lines and just using your whole arm to draw instead of your wrist can be really helpful for even just getting your brain moving. Or like there's all kinds of just weird art exercises that can kind of jot something. I think once you kind of hit a point where like you found something that you've enjoyed doing, then you can get into that flow state and you want to like keep doing it. So I think the hardest thing is like finding the thing that gets you into the flow state. Because once I'm in it, it's really hard for me to break out, which is fine. But yeah.
Oh, that's really fun. Yeah, this is how we kind of take control of our own brain and can get directed to do what we want. It's when you approach it in this way, it's just so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us.
Yeah, thanks for always being there to listen for whatever I've got every week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I look forward to it.
Me too. Thank you.
I'll see you soon.
All right.
Let's join Shannon Phoebe. Hey there, Shannon. I'm going to add you into the spotlight here and pushing the button here. I think you can unmute now.
There.
Yes, there we go. Hi there.
Hi. It's quite the thing to follow Kate.
Well, and it's not a competition.
No, of course.
But like but such an invitation to reset our mindset.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, in your conversations here at the last, it actually addressed a few of the things I've been struggling with during this last month and a half or so. It turns out I'm in Hawaii and have been here since January 18th and have had just an amazing opportunity finally to have some time to myself uninterrupted to actually do some journaling on a sort of an ongoing basis. I think some time ago when I shared my bird Tiki, the big macaw, I shared with you privately that I hardly ever get around to the journal. So I've had some struggles, ups and downs with, some of the things that you and Kate were just addressing. But what I want to share today is, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the word right or the phrase right. It's kind of a memento morte.
Memento more.
Memento more.
Yes.
So in Hawaii, the Polynesians centuries ago brought black pigs here for food, and almost everything that's here has come from off island, and very little that's in Hawaii is original still. So anyway, so the island has been overrun with black pigs, and they're quite destructive and they're a nuisance. They're not necessarily so dangerous to people as I've learned, but they are everywhere and they make horrible noises and they tear up property. So there is a law that you can hunt and shoot a pig at least once a year if you're non-native, and that's with a license. And so some pigs had been killed, and I discovered one shortly after it had been shot. So I tried sketching it. Well, I guess I'll start here. So this was when I arrived, and there's from the airplane, that's the coast of Kona. And then the very first plant that absolutely captured my amazement is this one called the Ivory cane palm. And I was thinking of you often during this trip because of your botany background, because this is a plant that has all stages of its life cycle at once on the very same plant. So you see the blossom, you see the fruit, you see the drop off of the seeds, everything all at the same time. Plus, it's a really beautiful plant. But that was just to introduce getting here. And then there are lots of pages that I did work on. And I got stuck with the pig actually because, well, I sketched him a lot as long as I could while he was freshly dead. And then I was like, whoa, I don't want to put color on him. I'm terrified I'll ruin the sketches. And so finally I tried a little bit of black on the one sketch that you see there. Now, this pig is lying dead on the ground. He's not standing. I do have some photographs, and certainly there are plenty of pigs if they'd stand still long enough, but they do run away from people for probably the reason that they are hunted. If you're native here, you can hunt however much you want. You know, if you're a Hawaiian descendant, then you can hunt pigs all the time. But anyway, so I finally broke down and added a little black to that tiny top pig, and you can see the bottom pig where there's, maybe you can see it, a shadow, and then the darker lines. Those are all corrections to the inaccuracies of the first very light sketch that I made, until I felt like I had kind of captured, it's not like I'm here doing nothing but drawing. I actually have quite a challenging schedule that I'm keeping up with, but I don't have a lot of time to do reference research. So I didn't really look pig anatomy or anything. I just did the best I could. So then this one is, his head kind of close up. Also, this is a—
oh, wow. Oh, and the measurements in here too.
Oh yeah, I measured everything while he was fresh because, of course, obviously I'm not going to sit there while he's in his various stages of decomposition. So, I put on my mask and I brought my chair and I sat up there and I did as much as I could right there with him in the grass. And I did take measurements, and even the nose there and the tooth. And so that's just a sketch that my intention is always to go back and, make these a little more, that's my struggle, wanting to make them a little more artily done, whatever. Anyway, so then I got fascinated by the feet. And so I sketched the feet quite a bit and measured them too, and how the hooves worked into the ankles and leg muscle and so on of the pig. And then I did take a little bit of time to try to be a little more thorough with the sketching. So this is just the foot again. Like I said, I got
this is cool. These studies are so much fun.
So you see that, the kind of the top view that are more finished, and then this is the side view here, and you can see these big hoof parts. And then this is the bottom view, which I didn't really, completely flesh out, but the bottom of their feet is pretty interesting with big pads of cushion, for their digging around and running through this rough territory here. I happen to be located way out in the sticks of Hawaii. I am not in town, and it's like an hour to get to a paved road. So I'm pretty isolated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then where I go to from there with this memento mori is, so I didn't finish drawing up these other things. I have the photographs, but I haven't drawn them yet. But what I was able to do was salvage this, I don't know if salvage the skull. Let's put this back here again and see if I can hold it up in the light better. So this is not a clean, polished, cleaned up skull. This is at this stage of it getting cleaned up by nature. And the process was pretty fascinating. I would go up every so often and check on the progress of that. And it went very fast here in the jungle. It goes very fast.
So about how long did it take to get to that stage?
To this particular stage, it probably took about 2 weeks. That's not very long. So
yeah, there's some bacteria just going to town.
Yeah. And so I've looked up how to clean this up and so on, and I might try to pack it and take it home when I go home.
That's a nice one. Those tusks are really nice. Let me grab something off my shelf here. So when I was a kid I was a nature counselor at a Boy Scout camp.
Whoa.
Yeah, let me add add spotlight. This I found this and watched it decompose, and then by the time camp was over, it wasn't fully decomposed. And so I took the head with all the little bits and put it in a plastic bag, and brought that home, and I put that that bag out on the back porch. And my mom had a friend who was helping her do some gardening things, and they would come together, they would make some tea, and they would garden together. Well, she came over and was doing some potting on the back porch, and there was this bag. And it was right, I guess, at face level. And so she thought, like, well, what's in here?
Oh, dear.
And she got the triple whammy of, number one, looking into the face of this. Number two, the smell of this little thing that had then been fermenting in the sun inside this plastic bag, just waiting to get out. And all of the flies whose larvae had been in there, who had then hatched, saw the daylight and decided that this was time en masse to fly out.
Oh,
and apparently it made an impact.
I guess so. Absolutely. Well, you've got it all nice and white now. So what was your next step?
Oh, so then what I did is I first let natural decomposition do as much as it could. So the more that nature does for me, the better. While that's going on, you have to be really careful not to lose teeth.
Yeah.
So it'd be fun to have a few more of those, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have all the teeth, and I'll explain what happened later, but go ahead. So then what?
So then what I did is I made I put it in a diluted ammonia solution. So ammonia, and that got a number of the oils out of it, right? And then it's also in there with a toothbrush, just like getting it all clean. And then I made a very diluted bleach solution, because if you put it in bleach too long, it'll completely eat all the bones.
Right.
but that kind of made the color more uniform.
Right.
And so that's the story of how I prepared that skull.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I will need to do. I have looked up a few different approaches, and one of them was to use oh, it'll come to me, the hydrogen peroxide also is as
I think if that's right, that wouldn't eat away at the bone.
I'm not sure that it eats away any more than bleach does. And you're only supposed to submerge them in that solution or put the paste on it for a certain amount of time to prevent exactly that. Yeah.
Oh, there was one other part.
Yeah.
This little skull has one other little piece of its story. There was also some meat that was kind of hard caked onto it. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to boil it and get that off. And my mom didn't want me using any of her cooking pots to boil this. So I got this very large tin can and put it in there, and then put it on the stove, turned it on, and went away and left it. And the soldering on the can came unsoldered, and this all the gunky fluid then comes down out across the stove and into the stove. Because when you go down those holes, you can't wash what's down there, but you can smell it for years.
You mean they didn't replace that stove immediately?
No, we kind of toughed it out, but that was I was then told on no uncertain terms that I could no longer boil my skulls inside the house.
I can see that. How old were you when you were doing all this?
I was probably 15, 16.
Yeah. I have a granddaughter who did something very similar with a possum skeleton. And I have all of those bones in a plastic container lined up. I mean, she put the whole skeleton back together again.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but she's outgrown that now, so she doesn't do that anymore. But what happened with mine and why there are teeth missing, I was going to fill in that part of my story. So I had gone down one night and to check on it, and I saw that it was nearly ready, but it was still, completely surrounded by wigglies. My sister said they look like those worms, those little worms you feed birds sometimes.
Yeah, like little mealworms.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that's what they were, and I didn't collect the sample.
Most likely they were the larvae of flies.
Yeah, I think my son suggested maybe here on the island it would be called a soldier fly. But anyway, so it was like so close to being ready, and it was perfect. It had all of its teeth. I came back, and I'm staying on a property that my son has that is a jungle farm. So anyway, I came back and I told him, and he said, Mom, you need to bring that back here, and we'll put it in one of my compost bins to finish out, because it's very close and it's safer if you do that. Well, it was already evening when I went up there in the first place, and I didn't want to go up again. And I thought, oh, it'll be fine until first thing in the morning, because I'm usually up and out by 6 or 6:30. So I went back up bright and early, and sure enough, the pigs, I mean, I do understand why there are taboos against pig eating, because they do eat their own. The other pigs had come and, thrown the bones around and so on.
No.
But they weren't interested in the skull, other than that they'd pushed it out of the way. So the skull that is of that pig, I tried then, I dug around in the grass to try to find whatever teeth. It does still have its tusks.
Canine, yeah.
Yeah, or yeah, the tusks actually are here on the bottom. But it had lost these teeth here, which were there the night before.
Yeah. Oh,
Just couldn't find them anywhere. It also lost one or two in here. Oops, it's dripping
Yeah.
because we had a big rainstorm last night. But this one is one that apparently my son had. Oh yeah, you've got a couple of holes there too. So does he on his.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he had this one, and probably from one that he shot himself. That's quite large. Look at that.
Isn't the texture on that back tooth crazy?
Oh, they're amazing. I mean, honestly, this whole thing has been quite a stunning, study. And I haven't, as I said, done the drawing yet, but I'm not going to be here. I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be here, but if it's according to the original schedule, I will be leaving pretty soon. So I've got a lot of drawing to do, because I would still like to do these from life, not from drawing, internet stuff. But anyway, so yeah, I did lose some teeth on this one. And when I brought it back, we didn't put it in the compost bin, because at that point it was looking more like it is looking now. So we did put it out where we thought maybe the sun could work on it a little bit. It's not really coming along very fast, so I've got some big steps to do on it. But to go further, in fact, look at here, if you can see it, I just spotted a little white worm there on
Oh
this.
yeah. Yeah. Oh,
I don't know what that's going to turn into, but anyway, whatever. So, and then this one is one that's quite old.
Oh, look at the moss on this.
Yeah, exactly. That's
that's fun.
Memento Morte. And this is what happens. So what he has done is he's hung his skulls on the front gate. Along the front gate. And this is one actually that I almost brought home with me the last time I visited, and he was supposed to send it, but you know how these things go. It's that undercover, but still out in the general elements of Hawaii, of this portion of Hawaii. And this mold was, I don't recall it being quite this extensive when I was here the last time.
That's so cool. I love that moss growing up there. And it also just sort of tells this story of death and life.
Exactly.
And how they all just weave together, don't they?
Yep, exactly.
Oh, wow.
And of course, I measured all the jaws, and this one, I'm going to call it the king pig jaw, because this is the one that Peter had from long time ago. He's lived here on the island for 20 years, and it's longer even than the one that I found, this one, but only by 1.5 or something like that. How big is yours? Do you know? I mean, I think a pig skull is a pretty rare item. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that's the top. Let's see. Well, mine's a bit bigger.
That's a nice skull. That's a big pig.
I have a small head too. But anyway, it was a pretty big pig.
That's fun.
And there's an even bigger one, shuffling around here that makes me nervous. But apparently, like I said, they're not. They really will run from people. There's one recorded incident where maybe somebody was killed by a pig, but otherwise they're not. Now, just quickly, I'll just scan through some of the rest of this. So my son keeps donkeys for soil building here. So I got to try to sketch my donkeys. And once again, I only am partially throwing color on them. My donkeys, you can tell I've been here too long. And then you can't see some of these lighter sketches that I did, but some maybe you can see. These are different exotic fruits and so on, which I have not yet, done anything further than get sketches, because as you know how hard it is when you're you have other things to do. And I don't know if you can see this one, but I love this one. Let's see if I can get him there. There he is.
Oh, whoa, look at this.
Yes, the big snails, which are no touch. You don't touch them in Hawaii. They came here. These are actually escargot snails. They were brought here because at some point somebody thought that they would grow escargot and manufacture that for sale. And of course they got loose. So now these snails are all over the island as well. And they're very large and they're very cool looking. And I'm really sorry I didn't have him painted up, you know, so that you could see the colors and the shine and all of that. And, but here they call them no touchies because they crawl around on top of droppings from many other animals. So they're a disease concern. So yeah, that's an issue. And I'll skip through a lot of these, although here's a quick page of just the Koki Frog. I'm not sure if you've
so
heard
loud. Yeah.
the Koki frogs. Yeah, so they are quite common here. And I have to sleep with them going on. You can maybe hear one in the background.
Yeah.
And at night, it's like a cacophony of noise. And I had to find a way to live with these guys. So I started listening really, really deeply into their chorus. And so I noticed that the interval that they do, bump, 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 is a seventh, almost always, maybe occasionally a sixth or a fifth. And then that's it for anybody who has a musical background, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then when you listen deeply into this mass of sound, you can sort of begin to hear like little melodies that are happening accidentally because they're on different, you know, kind of different rhythms and everything. And then pretty soon, if you're also listening really deeply, you can begin to feel the rhythm that's going on under that. And it's sort of, for me anyway, I was interpreting it as a kind of a jazz beat, you know.
That's great.
But only with all of them, you know, singing at the same time. And then just to throw in last here, just a couple of things. So this is the Hong Kong orchid plant, which can only blossom, which can only be propagated by cloning. And it's also been introduced to the island. It's one of the only things I really spent any time, you know, like taking to another level of sketch. But one other one that I did, and I didn't get all the parts done. Of course, I have all the parts and measurements and everything here, all my metadata. Got it all in, you know, with my darker pen. And then I was fascinated by this blossom here, which is called the African tulip tree, which is considered a weed tree here. So it's, you know, but it grows everywhere and it's really quite beautiful. So I had to do one of the blossoms, which a lot also with doing blossoms, sometimes I would pick them and bring them home. And what I learned is that although this incredible botany of this island anyway, that seems so sturdy, you know, the vines are thick and the greenery is so intense and everything is like so sturdy seeming, but if you take a blossom, the blossoms are incredibly fragile, very fragile. And just to share this for anybody who's interested, I have also just, you know, been trying out different tools. I brought a small collection of tools with me. And one of the tools that I brought was, you know, just a selected handful of watercolor pencils. And I must say, I think I've gotten spoiled by watercolor pencils because I can sketch in the watercolor pencil.
Yeah.
All this was. And then I just added a little bit of water, and I think it catches more of the liveliness and the vitality of the actual thing than if I had sat and sketched it
nice.
and worked my way through it. And then the last thing I want to say, this, I'm sorry for taking so much time. Thank you to everyone for listening. So my sisters and I did a natural history museum art Zoom on abstractionism, you know, on the abstract movement in art. And so they stepped us through following a particular artist. It was Joan Mitchell, and some works that she had done. She's apparently quite famous in the abstract world. She's passed away now. She's no longer with us. But anyway, so, and I think I had some angst going on. This has not been easy to be out here so isolated for so long. And to have the amount of work that I've had on my plate while I've been here. And so we were doing this kind of, you know, living into a piece that she had done. Hers was like 4 panels and it was called The Land. And then we were supposed to like do one of these panels. And so this is what I did.
Oh.
And these were, I also brought just a small selection of colored pencils.
Yeah.
And I just went, you know, I'm sick of this place, and it's just so wild and crazy. And and surprisingly, just doing that kind of like broke me free of a kind of a stuck place where I had gotten.
Oh, fun.
And I was like, wow, so this is art therapy.
That's great. Absolutely. Oh, wow. That's inspiring.
It loosens you for your other work too. If you just, you know, kind of like what Kate was saying, you just, you know, do what you do and move on. So that's all I have to share. Thank you so much.
Shannon, thank you so much. That was really, really fun to get into that experience. Wonderful. Hey, speaking of Kate, is it all right if I put you back on the spotlight so you can share your little friend there?
Oh.
That's pretty cute.
Oh, that is cute. How sweet.
Oh.
When I came home for Christmas, I brought my cat on the plane with me, and since then my mom has treated it like her grandchild, and she keeps sending these fun clothes and costumes for Kitty. So
That's cool. Is this the frog costume?
this is the frog costume. Here,
Ooh.
it's pretty ridiculous.
It's not easy being green.
Apparently.
Oh,
Yeah, she's not very good at wearing the sweatshirts and stuff because cats are kind of like a liquid.
Cats are a liquid.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really fun. Thank you.
I thought you guys would get a laugh out of that.
I love it.
Get a little
Let's see. Let's see what's going on in Volter's sketchbook. I see Ray Bonto has also got something to share. Hey there. Let's see. You can now unmute.
Yes. Hi. Well, nothing much has been happening in my nature journal, but last time, I'm sorry I forgot the name, but I was inspired by the idea of tracking the albatross. The albatross chick from an egg till first flight. So I got myself a big, thick sketchbook.
Oh, this is going to be the albatross book?
No, it's not an albatross book because here in Latvia, the Latvian National Fund for Nature has about 7 live webcams of birds that are nesting in Latvian forests. And this one camera is very popular, especially it has become popular last year. A lot of people have been watching it. It's of white-tailed eagles, and these are just massive birds. They're the biggest eagles in Latvia. And last year, sadly, the male got lost, probably dead, or territorial fighting some territorial fighting was to blame, sort of to say, and this year the female returned with a new male, and I was ready to sketch them, and I started on the 22nd of March, and this was a little sketches for 10 minutes. I sketched some of the just the profiles, getting used to the eagles and the eggs lying in the nest. And
what is the magpie saying?
Yeah, there's a magpie that landed close by to the nest.
What is the magpie saying there?
It's saying I'm saying that it sounded just like an alarm. It sounded just like an alarm. And then ready to sketch on the 23rd of March, I go in the camera and I see no eggs. And I read the forum that there's a timetable of everything that has been happening. And it turns out while the male was sitting on the eggs, a different female came onto the nest, an unknown female, and the male stood up and the female ate the eggs. It was emptied.
That
So
is, I'd say, a parenting fail.
yeah, but the male was not probably mature enough to breed, because it was also not bringing the nesting female any food and sitting on the eggs only for 3 minutes at a time. So, but I will probably continue with ospreys, because there are 5 other cameras to choose from. So like that.
Oh, what an interesting story. And a great idea to track those. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
thank you so much for sharing that.
My one more thing was my mom's too shy, but I'm gonna share it in her place, because she, I don't know where, but she has been also sketching, not a lot, but here and then, sketching some. And from your classes of perspective, wanted to
Oh,
share
whoa.
this.
Hey, Mom, you really observed that perspective so well. Really well executed. Hey, Mom,
Yeah,
we love it.
She's into.
And also, is
houses.
that a
She's
little bit of gouache on toned paper there?
Yeah, no, that's a white pencil. That's white pencil.
White pencil. Right.
Watercolor and white pencil. Yeah, she's an architect, so so the house is the thing that gets her. So
Oh,
this,
what fun.
but was there something else? Oh yeah, she wanted me to shoot this cacti. So
Oh, cool. What did she do to kind of get the, I see some of the needles have a little bit of a glisten on them. Is that a gel pen? Is that white pencil?
Is there a glisten? I don't think there is.
Oh.
I don't think there is. No, it's just graphite pencil and watercolor.
Ah, it must be that just sort of the angle of my screen is. That's really fun. Hey,
yeah, so like that.
Wonderful observations. Thank you. That's good.
Very much.
Mom, keep it going. Keep it going. You got this.
She does.
That's terrific. Hey, thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you very much.
Let's see here. Let's see what's in Ray Bonto's sketchbook, and then we're. Is it okay, Susan? Do you have to bounce right now? Let's check out what's in Ray Bonto's sketchbook, and then we'll check back in with our team mathematician. Ray Bonto, great to see you. Oh, wait, hold on a second. 1 minute. That's not right. For some reason, when it's just you spotlighted, it doesn't give me the ask to unmute button, but now it does. So now you're good.
Good to see you too. So I got a little excited, so I went ahead of you.
Great. Oh, the vampire. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Check that out. Now, if you go online and do a search for vampire finch, you can find pictures of them kind of doing their thing. Yeah, that's the sharp-billed crown finch. Oh man, that's good. Oh, and that 3/4 one. Oh, nicely executed there. very good proportions on these bills. That's
So,
cool.
as for my nature journal, I didn't do much in terms of pages, but on the one page, it took a lot of time.
Oh, we'd love to see it.
Now, it started, my mom gave me a project. Why don't you go and dissect a flower other than daffodils?
Oh,
I found a crocus. And I was opening it up, and then I found a dead ladybug inside.
oh, oh, how interesting. I wonder what the story there is.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It was covered with pollen. And here's some new bird.
Oh, that's fun. A great, good job with the metadata. And I like the little diagram showing where you found it. Wonder if it got trapped in there. There's an interesting story. Makes me want to look around at other crocus and see if other critters get stuck in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
And here's just some pigeons. And squirrels.
Oh, love it. That, again, 3/4 views. So challenging. And squirrels, they move fast. So you're going for subjects that move fast. You're getting angles on things that are, oh, that's so alive. That is so alive. Oh, hey, Ray Banto, well done. Really, really exciting to see this.
I found something strange. Now, at the place where I usually do my nature journaling, there's an urban garden beside it, like a hedge surrounding a bunch of flowers and small trees, about that thin. And I heard a rustling around there, and I saw a squirrel on top of one of those twigs.
Mm-hmm.
It was wobbling. I didn't know it could. It was so light. Or
Oh, just out on the tiniest little one. That's a terrific little gesture sketch. Tiny, tiny little branch. Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. I wonder how much that squirrel weighs.
Yeah.
Good,
It
good
looks pretty
question.
confident.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful pages. I love how you follow your curiosity. You know, you start with a crocus, you stay for the ladybird beetle, and Zochichil left a wonderful comment in the chat that said, "To die embraced by the petals of a crocus, not a bad coffin."
I saw that. Yeah.
That's a wonderful thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, that's finding the poetry in the moments around us. That's cool. Hey there, Arpan.
Hey, Jack.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, Jack.
Some great journaling going on here. Oh, well, Ray Banto, thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Thank
We're
you.
hoping to share some journaling from India sometime soon.
Oh boy, you've got me interested. You've got me interested.
Let's see what we come up.
You're going to see so much cool stuff. That's going to be great. When do you go?
Thank you. Around 2 weeks. One of these Saturdays. That's all.
Okay, I'm excited. I'm excited. I can't wait to see your journal pages from your trip to India. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And let's check in with our team mathematician, Susan. Let's see here.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes,
You can hear me. Good.
yes, you're live.
So listen, I have to tell you, you're very good at the thing called nerd sniping.
Nerd sniping?
Yeah, it's where you ask a nerd a very interesting question, and henceforth they can't focus on anything else except the very interesting question.
Oh, good.
So I didn't draw any finches. I'm going to have to go and watch the recording so I can learn about the finches. Yes, I was puzzling over your question about the angles. I'm afraid here's the thing. Like the thing about trying to draw diagrams, at least for me, and at least with astronomy, is that anytime I try to think about astronomy, I have to like draw like 5 or 6 different diagrams to correct all the mistakes in the previous diagram, because I realize I'm making false assumptions until I figure out how to think about it right. And then I have to draw another few diagrams until I figure out how to boil it down to something that actually makes sense to the outside viewer.
I love that, sort of iteratively thinking on paper.
So this is not that. I mean, this is the like first and second draft.
Great.
So I don't know, but you can see. So okay, so I also may have lost track of exactly what day you were looking at the sun and moon. Was that on the equinox, or
Well,
was
no,
it
it's today, as a matter of fact.
Oh, okay. Well,
which
very
is
close to the
so
equinox.
I've got my compass here. I actually could Avea. Here's what I'm thinking. Avea, could you sort of take over the meeting for a minute? And I'm going to run outside in 30 seconds. I'll get 2 measurements, and I'll be right back. And that way, my data set won't have a huge gap in it, and we'll find the next big thing. Would that be okay?
That's totally fine. Yeah, I'm gonna take Susan and make her the main spotlight, because I really want to see that diagram that she's got.
Okay, yeah. I don't know if it's going to be completely not understandable or what. I think this is more or less what I got. So this is, I guess, is not exactly what's going on today, because we are a few days after the equinox, but I figured it's always easier to think about these things on the equinox, or sort of at the extremes. But so, okay, so we got the Earth on the equinox. That is the day that the plane of the Earth's rotation aligns with the sun, which means that the sun is directly above the equator.
Oh, okay.
So that is not today, but there will be some variation from that. All right, so today, because it is a few days after the equinox, the sun is, I guess the plane of the sun is slightly above relative to us, because we are entering spring. But if you are in the northern hemisphere, you're standing on the Earth, right? Directly up for you is not up. It's directly out of the Earth, and the horizon is basically tangent to the Earth. So this is flat ground level, and this is up.
Oh, so is it that 90-degree angle then we're saying?
Yeah. Well, so basically, okay. So if I draw a line from the center of the Earth directly out to where you are on the Earth's surface, and keep following that line, that is directly up. That's if you're looking directly up over your head.
Oh, okay.
So there's a little person there. I don't know how you can see.
Oh, that makes sense. So like it's when we're doing sky potatoes, and then you're looking directly overhead. That's 90. I mean, that's 9 potatoes. Okay.
Sky potatoes?
I think.
I've never heard of it.
The 1 potato, 2 potato, when we're doing the degrees of arc.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yes.
Sky potatoes, but I've never. That's a good term for it.
So great.
When we're doing sky potatoes. Yes.
I thought it was like between that and sacrificial pancakes, you're making like latkes. Sounds delicious.
Latkes.
So this is so right. So Jack, I don't know how much you saw that. Right. So if I draw a line from the center of the Earth directly out to where you're standing on the northern hemisphere, that's up. That's considered that's 90 degrees. Then the horizon is this line that's tangent, a plane actually that's tangent to the Earth's surface. And because you are actually much smaller than this relative to the Earth, the fact that the Earth drops away from the horizon, you can't really see that unless you're like on the ocean or something like that. So, okay, so this is the part, this actually took me a surprising amount of time to like realize that I was messing this up. I put the sun in, and this is where I'm assuming that we are actually on the equinox, which means that the plane of the Earth's rotation, or the plane of the sun's orbit around the Earth, if you're looking at a geocentric model, as I am fond of doing, the plane of the Earth's rotation is aligned. The sun is on that plane. In other words, the sun is therefore aligned with the equator, is directly above the equator. So that's not the case today, but it was the case a few days ago.
Yeah.
So this is the part that maybe is a little confusing, but the sun is infinitely far away. It's not actually, but it's what, 93 million miles away or something like that? It's very far away.
Yeah, long enough for those rays to be coming in pretty parallel.
Right, exactly. So in other words, any line that I draw that is parallel to these green ones and it goes in that direction is pointing toward the sun, which means that for you at your spot here, if you look in the direction of this green dotted line, you're looking at the sun. Don't do that because you'll hurt your eyes. Okay. So then we said, okay, now this is where I lost track. Did you determine that from your observations today, are you observing that today the Earth or the moon is following a track that is below the sun, or was that previously?
Today, it is clearly below the sun.
Okay, let's assume that today is the equinox because it will be it's pretty close, right? Or at least that this is, let's put it this way. If the moon is clearly below the sun today, it probably was on the equinox as well. So let's assume that this was 2 days ago, just because that's the diagram that I drew. I was saying it's easier to think about this when like you have a sort of a reference point. So, you know, once we figure out how this works on the equinox, then we figure out how to modify it for a few days after the equinox, but I didn't get that far. Okay, so the moon is also at infinity. It's not quite as far away as the sun, a tiny fraction of how far away the sun is, but it's still pretty darn far away, and that's a technical term. So the moon, apparently the plane of the moon's rotation about the Earth is not exactly horizontal relative to the equator, and you're seeing the moon below the sun, so that means that that plane is pointing this way, the purple. And again, any purple line that's parallel to this, you're going to point toward the moon. You're going to see the moon. Okay, so this right here, the blue is the horizon. This arrow here is straight above your head. And there, at some angle above the horizon is the angle that you're seeing the sun at its highest point in the sky. And at a different time of day, you're seeing at some angle above the horizon is the moon's highest point in the sky. Okay. So what is the angle that you're seeing? Well, I looked up the latitude of San Mateo, California, which is 37.6 degrees approximately. I'm assuming you're in San Mateo, California.
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Okay. This is okay. This is the old draft. Here's the new draft, right? So let's back to this, right? So the angle that your latitude is actually the same as the angle between this line from the center of the Earth out to where you are and the equator.
Oh,
that's what your latitude is. That's why the latitude at the equator is 0 and the latitude at the poles is 90 degrees.
Oh,
that's what your latitude is.
Oh, the things I never knew.
So you think of latitude as like a horizontal line going across. That's what you get if you take this and you sort of spin that line around and make a sort of a cone and look at that cone as it hits the surface of the Earth. You get that circle that is not actually a great circle on the Earth, so it's not straight. But that's your latitude. So if you look, just nice high school geometry here, we have two parallel lines hitting another line that crosses them. And there's a technical term for the relationship between these two angles that I have totally forgotten, but these two angles are the same. So this green angle is your latitude, but the angle of elevation of the sun is measured from the horizon. So you're saying, how far do I look to go up from the horizon to there? That's the red angle, and that is the complement of the green angle. So it's 90 degrees minus your latitude. I hope. So I'm hoping that what you're going to tell me is that today that the highest point of the sun was a little bit different than 90 degrees minus your latitude. And I'm not sure how different. Will it be higher? It should be higher, I think.
All right. And because we've got daylight savings going on here, right now we're probably not at the highest point of the sun.
Right. I forgot that you guys are in the West Coast. See, out here it's 3:23, so it's at the sun's past its highest point, but not for you guys. So hopefully, I guess when you take that, when you find that highest point, hopefully it ought to be something a little higher than this number. 52.4 degrees, I think. I might be totally wrong here because this is what usually seems to happen whenever I try and think about astronomy, is that I like figure it out, convince myself, and then realize that I totally messed up. So I might be wrong.
Well, no, but isn't but is it's fun to so you're predicting from this?
I think if you had made these measurements on the day of the equinox, the highest elevation you would see the sun, highest angle of elevation, would have been 52.4 degrees. Give or take some because of the measuring being imprecise and all that. And I think today, because
what day was the equinox?
Sunday, I think. Sunday.
Yeah.
Sunday.
Let me see here. So that would have been the 20th.
Yes.
And I can actually find that out here.
Are you looking up a site, or you?
So you're saying that it should be on the equinox, the highest point of the sun probably would have been around 52 degrees?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, am I totally off, or am I close?
And I'm now looking at timeanddate.com website.
Okay.
Saying that for San Francisco, a little bit to the north of me, at 1:47 p.m., the highest point, it was at, drumroll, 52 degrees.
All right, there we go. Now, okay, so quiz. I live in Albany, New York, which is at a higher elevation, not a higher latitude. My elevation is probably lower because we don't have this Sierra Nevadas, but higher latitude than you. So should I see the sun higher or lower on that same day? I live up here. I live at a higher latitude.
So then your sun would have been lower in the sky.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah.
Oh,
I believe so.
No,
I did not, in fact, take measurements on that, and I should have. And I should actually do this more because I tend to do much more thinking about it and less actual going and taking measurements. So I should do that and find out. But here's the main question that you had, which was, will a difference in angle of elevation between the sun and moon, will that tell you something about the angle of the plane of the moon? That is the plane of the moon's orbit. And so working that out, I think yes. So mathematicians like to use Greek letters for names of angles as variables. So don't panic if you don't like that. I couldn't keep writing out all the words. I had to put a variable because it was going to make too much of a mess. So I called this the Greek letter theta. Theta being the angle that the plane of the moon's orbit makes with the plane of the equator, which is the plane of the Earth's rotation. And so I call that theta. And I'm assuming because you said you've seen the moon at its highest point seems to be lower than the sun at its height, or at least the moon's entire path seems to be lower than the sun. That would imply that plane is pointing basically like down in this orientation, right? So whatever that angle is, again, moon is at infinity. So this other purple line is also pointing at the moon. And because the line that points at the sun is parallel to the equator, the angle between the moon, the plane of the moon's orbit and the equator, which is theta, is the same angle as the difference between the sun and the moon's angle of elevation. So it should be that whatever this guy is in purple, that difference there should be the angle that the plane of orbit is making with the equator, I think. Now it's now occurring to me that that plane may actually not be like or aligned with the direction of the sun, which might screw this whole thing up. Which is why you really need to do this in a three-dimensional coordinate system and like actually do the math, really, I think, to figure it out. But so I may actually be I'm realizing now that this, I'm maybe not taking into account the three-dimensionality of this in the right way, but I think that that would be right if we assume that that angle is like aligned in the same direction as the direction the sun actually is, which I don't know if that's true. So, but like I say,
this is
usually
so
yeah, this is yeah. You see
this
why I
is
couldn't pay
so
attention
much
to
fun. This is brilliant.
So basically, I think part of the answer is it's more complicated than that. I think because here's the problem is I'm sort of assuming that this plane is like tilted, but is more or less tilted in the direction of the sun. It might be tilted like this, you know, or you know, some angle.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep,
So
yep,
depending
yep,
on
yep.
how that's oriented relative to what direction the sun's in, that makes everything more complicated. And what I'm guessing is that tilt of the moon's orbit. My guess is that tilt probably changes over time and doesn't always point the same direction as the sun. And of course, it's only a very subtle difference, or should be, I think. And that only when that tilt is exactly oriented in just the right way relative to the sun, and we get a full moon, that's when we get a lunar eclipse. But I think requires more study and more thinking and more tracking. Because what my guess is that if you were, I'm not suggesting this because sleep is important, but if you were to track this every day for a month, and you would see that the moon and sun's paths are you know, sometimes closer together and sometimes farther apart, and sometimes the moon's above the sun, but that if you do that like in the next lunar cycle, that you'll find, I think what you'll find is that those paths don't line up at the same times in the lunar cycle. But I don't know, and you should try it. And
so, but if they do line up, right, then that means that the plane of the moon would be
is in a fixed orientation relative to the direction that the sun is from the Earth, which would also mean that plane rotates with the Earth's orbit around the sun.
So then you'd have the planet. So it'd be doing this as it goes around.
No, I think if it's doing this as it goes. So how come you can make that? Here we go. But yeah, if it's doing this as it goes around, the sun's in a different direction every time, which means that is going to line up differently every month. If it's doing this, I can't do it properly. That is, if that plane like rotates with the Earth's rotation around the sun, then I think you get the same thing every month. Or every
so the question then. So the moon itself, its face is tidally locked towards the Earth. So there's always one face towards the Earth. So the question is the plane of the orbit of the moon also tidally locked relative to the sun? Oh, that would be towards the sun.
Yeah.
So yeah, is the
Which
plane?
seems to me like that would be very
is the
unlikely.
plane? So it is.
Just to make, like that seems like that would be so surprising that would be the case. I mean, granted, things are surprising, but I guess there's no particular reason to expect that.
So if I'm the Earth and this is the moon with the plane of its orbit, if it is tidally locked, then it is doing
Yes.
that.
This is what we need. We need spinny chairs. Yes, exactly. Yes.
And then
and then I think what you see is that every
as-
lunar cycle you're seeing basically the same thing happening.
or is the plane of this something? And
Or is it
so
something else? Maybe that plane actually also rotates, but on a different period than the Earth's rotation around the sun. I don't know. Let's find out. But okay, here's the thing though, right? Like you have to figure that stuff out in order to be able to predict things like eclipses, right?
right.
And people have been predicting eclipses for hundreds of years.
Yes, this is right.
Which means people figured out how to do this stuff.
Aren't people beautiful?
Yes.
This is part of the capacity of our species. We can be so clever and so foolish at the same time, right? And that is baked into that's baked into the just what we are.
So I was thinking about a time I went to the planetarium in Chicago, which is very cool. But one of the really cool things they have at the planetarium is they have this whole display of all these ancient astrolabes.
Oh.
Which an astrolabe is a device that they had. I mean, I actually was just looking it up because I was curious. And apparently they've had, like the ancient Greeks had like versions of this and the Romans had. But, certainly in the last couple hundred years, they made these very complicated devices that have all these different spinning dials and things. And you basically, it figures out the connection. Usually you'll have one astrolabe. Okay. I think the ones I'd seen, I'm trying to remember, I think they had them, there'd be one that would be like fixed for a particular latitude. And then you could find out basically based on the time of day, the time of year, the position of the moon and sun and various stars that are notable, and your latitude and longitude. And typically, I think you would have one like component that's like designed for a particular latitude, and there were some of them that had interchangeable components, and you could like swap them out if you change latitude. And if you knew all but one of those things, then you could figure out the others. So if you wanted to navigate on the sea, for instance, and you wanted to figure out, well, am I facing the right direction? Well, you could figure, you could, or that is, have I traveled far enough west? Well, you could work out based on your astrolabe, which would tell you here's where the position of the moon, or here's I guess the moon mostly I think it was like the sun versus the North Star versus various other identifiable constellations. And of course, that only works in the Northern Hemisphere. So if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you have a different set of stars, or anywhere in between, right? And if you had all that information, and if you had an accurate timepiece,
that was the challenge.
When you were traveling on a moving boat, then you could figure out what your longitude was, and you'd know how far west you'd gone.
And you can't bring the pendulum clock on the boat.
Right. So this was a huge issue in the past, was like finding ways of creating accurate clocks that could keep time on a moving boat.
Wasn't one of the
your navigation, which who would have thought the time was needed for navigation, but it is.
That's right. And there are big military secrets that if you developed, so when you developed a good clock, and if your vessel was about to be boarded by the French, you would take your clock and throw it overboard.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
You did not want your clock, like if you had a really good clock, you did not want that to fall into the enemy hands.
Yeah. So, and of course, if
Cool.
you knew the time, if you knew where you were and everything, then you could find out the time. But I guess that's less important in all this. So yeah, it was pretty fascinating. So they have cool, very, very cool display at the museum, at the planetarium in Chicago. I'm sure other planetariums have other similar things, but this one was very memorable. And some of these were like, especially there were some that were made by like people in Islamic countries in like the 1600s that were incredibly intricate, and
They
they're
did math.
cool and beautiful, and,
Like a boss.
and they show the constellations like with the drawings, and just like they didn't just make a tool that was useful, it also had to be beautiful, because of course it did. It's so cool.
Because you can.
Yeah.
See, this is so, folks, this is what we're seeing here. This is deep geeking out, right? Deep geeking out. Write that down. This is what we want to. I mean, this is what we're capable of, and one thing you get curious about it, it leads to the next. It leads to the next, and leads to the next. And just saw a chat comment from Ivea saying, now I need to figure out how to make her own astrolabe, right? So, and she's going to be doing that. This is fun. This is exciting. This is the fun we can have with our brains. And also what we're saying about here about the people predicting eclipses, predicting eclipses. So if your model makes predictions, if your model doesn't make predictions, it's not a useful model, right? What you want is you want to be able to, like, here's my model, and I'm going to make a prediction from that. If the predictions are not borne out by our observations, then we say this model is probably off. And that's one of the reasons why this kind of ties back to the sort of independent line of evidence thing we're talking before about. Here, looking at sort of beak structures and bones and other morphological features, we think that these are the relationships between these birds. And then you would say, if these evolved through an evolutionary process, I would predict, you can make a prediction from that those same patterns would be mapped into the genes. And then you can go and look at that. And if they don't, it says, your idea is not that predictive. It's not that useful. But when we then go and you do it, and you go like, oh, I expected to see this based on this model, right? Now, I can actually look here, and this is exactly what I see. That means that it doesn't mean that your theory is correct. This is important to understand. It doesn't mean our theory is correct. It means that it is useful. That it is useful. And it's probably a little bit closer to correct than we were before. There may be other assumptions and things that we're not thinking about in these sorts of things, but it is a useful explanation that describes what we see. It does not mean that that is what happened, but sort of using this approach, we can, when something is really predictive like that, we can give it provisional acceptance. Some other data set pops up and it doesn't match with that, we're willing to change our mind, but we're going to give this provisional acceptance because it's this incredibly predictive, useful thing. Just like our explanation of gravitation. It's useful, it's predictive. You can land a probe on Mars and launch a helicopter with that understanding of gravitation. And so this is.
But, as far as I'm concerned, here's the thing. All this stuff that we just did, all of this, like, it matters that the sun is very far away, because if not, we have some major trigonometry to do.
No, thank you.
But it doesn't matter in this model whether the Earth goes around the sun or the sun goes around the Earth. So as far as I'm concerned, my geocentric model is still as predictive as it ever was. Where's my geocentric model?
Yes,
You haven't disproven to me
that's right.
that
I remember that.
the sun goes around the earth. But now that I think about that, I realize with your little index card and your spinny chair, I think that like Occam's razor, right? Like we try not to add, we try to take the simplest explanation that fits the effects, right?
Or the
So
one that requires the
direction-
fewest additional assumptions.
Right.
Right.
I think so. So one thing would be like, so this question of the plane of the Earth's, the plane of the moon's orbit around the Earth, right? I think like the simplest assumption there, which may or may not be true, and we would be able to do some testing here. The simplest assumption would be that that plane is probably sort of fixed relative to the overall universe, whatever it is, right? So if the sun
or
the Earth is
are you
fixed-
thinking fixed relative to the Earth?
well, I think fixed relative to some hypothetical, like inherent coordinate system of the universe, which we know doesn't exist if we understand relativity, but never mind. Like, so here's what I'm saying is if we assume the geocentric model, where the moon's going around the Earth, the sun's also going around the Earth, there's no particular reason for that plane to be different relative to the Earth. And you might assume that that plane is more or less in the same direction relative to the Earth all the time. Which I think it may be, but we'll find out. But it shouldn't have any connection with the sun. And now again, actually, now I'm realizing this doesn't make much sense. If the sun is the center of the solar system and is basically fixed relative to the rest of the universe, and the Earth's going around that, and the plane of the moon's orbit around the Earth, you would definitely think that plane, that it would be more of a simple assumption that plane goes like this, then the idea that plane continues to basically face the sun the whole time. I'm trying now. Okay, now see, I started off thinking that maybe that might be something that's different between those two models, and now I'm actually rethinking that and thinking that maybe I don't believe that.
So what also what I love here is that because you're thinking on your feet, you're talking it out loud. We are in discourse here about the ideas. And what that does is you get an idea. When the idea is sitting in your head, it feels bulletproof. And then you get it out into the realm of conversation and discussion. And then it's possible to see it more articulately when things are not in your head. So this is what cognitive psychologists call externalizing our thinking. So, and we think better when we work it out on paper, like that sheet that you showed us. And when you, and also I love that you had, when you're thinking it out on paper, you were reaching for all these different colors.
Yeah, that was after I realized I had so many different intersecting lines, and that I knew what they meant, but nobody else was going to know what they meant.
Right. No, and this is also sort of training yourself to be a visual thinker. This is visualization of ideas. And that is a skill set that, like, for me, the idea that you're going to draw, the line out from the center of the Earth, and then your latitude is going to be, I've never thought of, that from the inside out, and then the relationship when you drew the horizon line of that being aligned and perpendicular to that, this sort of visualization, this sort of thinking, this is useful. This is interesting.
You're saying about like the way talking out those ideas and having things make more sense. So I really think that that's kind of key to learning anything, whether it is drawing or nature journaling or astronomy or math or anything. Though I really think there's a danger in watching somebody who understands a thing very well explain that thing. because there's like,
Yeah.
in this case, I don't think that I understood it well enough to explain it in a very neat and tidy way. But if I can explain to you how to find the derivative of a function in calculus, and I know that thing very well, and I can give you a very pat explanation of how that all works, and at the end, you're going to feel like you understood it.
Yeah, the illusion of understanding, the illusion of knowledge.
And then when you have to go and solve your own version
I'm
of the problem,
interacting
you're
with
not
this
gonna-
person whose understanding is better than mine, it's really easy for me to subjectively feel that my understanding of it is better than it is. They've also done the things when people are able to look stuff up on their phone, we have the subjective feeling that our understanding of this stuff is much better than our actual understanding of it.
Yeah. And I mean, I teach math, and I have students who watch the lecture and don't actually do these things themselves, and I tell them they need to, and sometimes it takes until after the first test before they realize that they need to change their approach. But but the thing is, I think about this because honestly, in a lot of these sessions, a lot of the time I'm not drawing along with you when you're showing us how to draw something, and part of it's because it's hard for me to keep track of all these things and do it kind of be able to look at.
Especially if I give you a math puzzle at the start,
I can't pause it or something. Yeah, that's when you don't give me a math puzzle to solve. But so the thing is though, is that I come away from it thinking, I get how the finch beaks are shaped. Well, not in this case, because I get how to draw a nightingale now, but it's not the same, because when I actually come to me having to do it, all of a sudden I have to figure that out for myself. But at the same time, there are some good tips and techniques that I do pick up, so that's very good. But I need to be doing more of that practice. And I was thinking about
you got to get some Ray Bonto on there, right?
Yeah.
Like be like,
well,
like I actually did 7 more while you were doing that.
I don't want to like monopolize the whole. I don't know. If
No. This is how we're going to bring out our show. This is our wrap up here.
So I promised you some skunk cabbage.
Oh, actually, but before we do the skunk cabbage, just to sort of tie into what we're saying earlier. All right, what Susan was just talking about kind of getting it out of your head, getting it onto paper or into discourse and discussion. This is an idea that is fundamental to the educational precepts developed by Charlotte Mason. She has this idea of narration, right? So, there the kid reads a book and like, oh yeah, I understand that. I remember that. Oh, no, you don't. Because what you have to do is then take that book and kind of narrate it back and retell the story through your filter. And then when you do that, you realize it's in that process that we come up against what we really understand, what we don't. And so that's getting it out of here and into the space of discourse or into the space of the piece of paper in front of you. And just such a critical part of thinking. So I just also wanted to use this as an opportunity to send a shout out to CM.
Oh, Mason, I gotta look her up. That's awesome. Well, to bring that back around, right? Why is nature journaling such a useful tool for learning about nature? Because if I see something cool happen in nature, I have to figure out how to explain what I just saw in my book.
Yeah.
And in figuring out how to explain that, I understand it better.
Yeah.
But here's
let's check out the skunk cabbage, and then I am going to have to bounce because I am teaching nature journaling today in Amelia's classroom at school.
Oh, okay. Well, then I will save the next few pages for next time because they're very cool. But Ray Bonto, look at my skunk cabbage, and then you can tell me whether you think it's a real cabbage or not.
Oh, hold on. Let me make my screen small.
So I was looking up and I realized that you guys have Western skunk cabbage looks totally different, but it is in the same family.
Yeah, this looks totally different than the beastie I know.
Yeah,
these are neat.
So
How does it smell?
To the same place as this.
Yep.
And they're everywhere. I mean, there were probably hundreds and hundreds of them. And because they're just sort of like brown and sticking out of the brown earth, you don't really realize how many there are until you look closely, but they're everywhere. Yeah. I wanted to get up really close and like look at them because I wanted to like see this. The thing is that the outer part is actually this really like solid, it's a bract actually, but it has a name that I've forgotten. Looking at it, and then the actual flowers are inside on this little, what is it, spadix, I think. And all the members of the arum family have something of that form. So calla lilies have basically the same structure, just prettier.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I can't, this stuff grows in such like swampy conditions. I really couldn't, I tried to get up close to them, and I really was just like sinking into the mud. And also I realized stepping on some that were like deep in the leaf litter in trying to get close to them. So I backed off and I said, okay, we're not going to, I used the binoculars to get a closer look, but I would have liked to find one that I can get closer to see this. But,
or you got to bring a little stool that you can perch on, so you're not.
Yeah, the problem is I was worried I was going to crush, so I couldn't tell what was under my feet. So, but there's a bridge that goes kind of like over this little stream, and so I could sit on that, which was nice because I could balance my book on there. So I'm really trying to practice drawing and painting right there instead of just from a photo. But I will say that working from photos is really, really good practice also for getting to understand the thing. I think that those two are a good combination. But yeah, so I wanted to like figure out like how does it grow, and also just like the variation in colors and patterns. Usually it's something along these lines where it's this sort of like reddish brown, sometimes almost purpley, and they have these little lines and stripes, and then there'd be some green in there. But some of them were like all sort of greeny yellow with just a few stripes. Some of them were this just like lovely glossy burgundy color. And like this, and then most of them are growing out of the very, very muddy ground, but a few were growing straight out of the water. And I don't think I'd ever realized that there's this like sort of papery, I guess also a bract that they seem to be growing out of. I don't think I haven't seen them early enough before. So now I need to go back, like next year I gotta like come back like earlier in March so I can see what happens before they actually grow the full flower. But yeah, there's I don't know if this is another flower or if this is a leaf.
I really want to get inside this and see what
this is like all I could see through the binoculars. And
are these really fly or beetle pollinated?
I think it's flies, yeah. And they do supposedly have a sort of terrible smell of rotting flesh. I did not get close enough to actually smell it, but I'd like to. And the leaves, which come up later, the leaves are huge, and they just really fill. Like in another month, this whole thing is going to be just green leaves, giant green leaves. The whole thing. So yeah, and the leaves can be eaten. I think they were called skunk cabbage in part because you can eat them like lettuce or cabbage. They are a bit skunky, so maybe not the most like delicious thing, but if you like that sort of thing. But yeah, they're in the arum family along with Jack in the Pulpit and calla lilies and all kinds of cool stuff, and along with the giant corpse flower that seems like every botanical garden has got one of these days, and that blooms like every 30 years and has
that's what I got to smell one in
very, very cool.
In San Francisco. There was a corpse flower that in their little there was in an indoor arboretum, not arboretum, sort of flower conservatory, and it had a strong odor. That was impressive.
I think the one at the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens bloomed a few years ago. I did not get a chance to go, but next time I'll have to find one. But they don't bloom very often, so
if it's edible, does that mean that then the family is a candidate for plant families in our food? I'm going to bring in our mad botanist.
I will say for that the Jack in the Pulpit does produce little berries that are very much not edible. I've been told. I have not tested it, and I'm not going to. But I don't know about leaves.
Studies of that?
But yeah.
Yes.
So yes, spathe and spadix. Right, the spathe is the outer part that's not actually a flower but covers it, and then the spadix is the guy in the middle that holds a whole bunch of little flowers. Right? Yeah. So this one was actually quite wide. The Jack in the Pulpit has this. Looks like a little sort of brown cattail kind of thing, but it's actually got very, very tiny flowers. Man, yeah, they're very, I love weird plants. Aren't weird plants great?
This is great.
And it's spring. It's spring because there's flowers blooming.
It is spring. It is
terribly.
spring. Spring is sprung. Oh, Susan, that's a delight. That is an
Very,
absolute
very
delight. And I
Finally
look
got a chance.
forward to your next round of geeking out on those and seeing what that looks like. And also there's a few more pages in there that look forward to seeing in our next class. But I need to bounce. I'm going to try to make a sandwich really fast, then run out the door to go teach the class. But this has been really fun. Let's be in touch about the all-night geek out party. I don't remember. We had a cool name for it.
I think Sky Potatoes, I think, is now the name. Whenever the name was
Sky Potatoes. Yeah, Sky Potatoes. That's good. Although the last time I was doing Sky Potatoes and then comparing that with what I was getting using my my compass and the little plumb bob that's built into it, the altimeter. My Sky Potatoes were not working very well for me. And so I'm looking for now a way of calibrating my personal Sky Potatoes.
I wonder how much of a difference it makes that your Sky Potatoes are basically centered on your shoulder and your eyes are above that. I wonder how much difference that makes as you go up.
Yeah.
You could
be interesting.
Punch your shoulders like this,
And also one of my shoulders, I have on this one, I have a hard time really extending this one because of a jujitsu injury. And so I may be holding one of my arms at a little bit of a, not the full on Sky Potato angle, which would then throw off my Sky Potato measurement system. All right, another thing for us to explore. Until next time, this is your Nature Journal Workshop with your host, John Muir Laws and Avea Moore. Susan, thank you so much for sharing these mathematical wonders and mysteries with us, and going to 11 with us on this idea. That was.
Thank you for nerd sniping me.
Tell me the term again.
Thank you for nerd sniping me.
Nerd sniping. I'm going to take advantage of this again. So I got to warn you, there will be more to come. Everybody, until then, be kind, and let's take care of each other all around this globe. We need to be taking care of other people, of natural places and living things, the non-living things too. We are stewards of this planet. Our incredible brain that can do this stuff can also make bad decisions. So we have to really kind of help ourselves, help our species do the right thing. And I hope you have an opportunity to do that today. Until next time, friends, thank you so much for being here. Vultures, you're wondering what's going on with my sketchy moonness. So I'm gonna show you my sketchy moonness, and then we're going to get into our topic today, which is looking at the beak of the finch, with a cluster of birds from the Galapagos Islands. So this was on the full moon here. The purple is the sun rising up across the sky, from rising in the east, and of all crazy things, setting in the west. So on the equinox, that's when it actually does that. You know, on solstices, not so much, but on the equinoxes, they rise in the east and they set in the west. So at that time, what was the moon doing? The full moon rose in the east, tracked through the sky the same height that the sun went, and descended in the west at the same spot. Isn't that cool? So if you just saw that, you would say to yourself like, oh, okay, they follow the same path. All right, that makes sense to me. I guess I've got that. But the thing that made me kind of go about this is that sometime earlier, oh no, I guess it's over here. I had been making other observations during a waning moon and saw that the sun was a high arc in the sky and the moon was a lower arc. And then on a waxing moon, the sun was a high arc in the sky and the moon was a higher arc. And so this on our, so then that made me think that, all right, so when is it switching over? And I thought that probably on the full and the new moon is when it goes from being above to below the path of the sun. So today being the half moon, check out what it's doing. All right. So this is the path of the moon and my sleepless night. You see, at 5 o'clock I was still asleep. And then so it came up to about 25 degrees high in the sky, and then it's almost down. It's just 10 degrees above the horizon right now. But in one more hour, it's gonna be out of sight. So wow, look at this really low arc. I'm expecting that the sun is going to go way up here. And then Susan, are you on the call? Susan, can we spotlight Susan if she's around, if she's willing? So Susan, hey, I'm going to add spotlight. Hey.
Hey. I'm not an expert on the moon, I will say.
No, but you are
no more than any of the rest of us.
You are our in-house mathematician.
That's true.
And so what I'm wondering is if I have this arc in degrees in the sky and this arc in degrees in the sky, will I be able to, I'm thinking that the reason that it's changing is because the plane that the moon is orbiting on is different than the Earth is spinning. And will that difference between the two be the difference in degrees between those two planes? That is your that's I want that to kind of percolate around in your brain, and then we'll get back to you at the end of the talk. I'm wondering, will I be able to estimate the angle of the plane of the moon from the orbit of the Earth, right? So
yeah, I think the answer is yes, but spherical geometry is always more complicated than that, is what I've learned. but I was thinking of a thought, which is your suggestion that perhaps those two planes may be in alignment at the full moon.
No. Yes. I'm thinking that this is the full and the new moons here.
Yeah. So my guess, my hypothesis that might require more sleepless nights of testing. Perhaps I'll have to join you. And I do value my sleep, but perhaps I'll have to make a sacrifice and join you in this. My hypothesis is that at different times of the year and on a different cycle, those planes may actually not always quite line up, because what I'm wondering is, when those two planes are essentially aligned, shouldn't we get a lunar eclipse on the full moon? And we don't get a lunar eclipse every full moon, but we sometimes do. Mm-hmm. So this is my.
So you're saying repeat this at, here we did it at the equinox. What is this going to look like on solstices?
Or even just next month.
Or even just next month. Oh, all right, game on.
Yeah, because I have not particularly studied the whole process of predicting eclipses, but as far as I can tell, it's not quite as regular as all that. Right. But we can predict eclipses. And so my question is, can we figure out when the next lunar eclipse is going to be? Lunar eclipses occur on the full moon when the Earth is perfectly aligned in between the sun and the moon, and therefore casts a shadow. And that doesn't happen every month. So this is my question. So I may have to join you in some sleepless nights here, and some days, and do some more tracking of the moon myself because I've been a bit lazy about that.
All right, so this is, but this is, I thought you'd appreciate some fun mathematical geeking
absolutely.
out.
Yes, that's very cool.
Yeah, maybe what we could do is if we have, we should have a sleepless night party where we just have an open Zoom room somewhere and people can drop into it if they happen to wake up in the middle of the night and see who is also tracking that thing at the same time. That would be terrible for our circadian rhythms.
Worth it.
But it could be fun. So
can I just say what a beautiful diagram your depiction of these planes is, and the way that you've used the lights and darks to be able to show which plane is being viewed behind the other. It's very, very
thank you. Yeah, I had fun doing that. I think I need to think about how I shade the part. Like, I think that this corner of the Earth down here should be then darker if I'm being consistent. But anyway, but yeah, I had fun trying to think of how to show that. And then I'm going to write in, I'm going to draw in what the phases look like here, 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 here. And then if this is the northern hemisphere, I'm going to figure out, is it spinning this way or this way? From observation, not from, so this is, I know that all this stuff is stuff that I probably could find looking it up in a book somewhere. I'm sure it's available on the web, but I'm intentionally avoiding the temptation to do that, just so that we can sort of geek out old school. So we'll let this.
I understand things a lot better when I figure them out for myself.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
And then when you do figure them out for yourself, and then you compare it with other stuff, and it doesn't match up, then this is often an insight that there's something in my way of thinking about it that went astray, or perhaps there's something wrong with that. It's less likely there may be something wrong with that original theory,
which is the most fun.
It's possible, but the low-hanging fruit is that, oh, where did I make a goof? It's not that I've discovered cold fusion, it's that I didn't have part A plugged into part B, and forgot to connect that wire over there. So thank you so much, Susan, and we'll just I'll check also back in with you at the end of the show to hear any final thoughts on sort of angle of the moon.
Mm-hmm. I'll see if I can give you anything more than what you've already got. I'm not sure, because I think you're probably spot on.
Right. I do love having an in-house mathematician.
Glad to provide that service. I have to study up on my spherical geometry more.
Great.